As promised, we are here with the famous children's series, and I'm going to be reading Handel. I always forget where the camera is, so I hope that I hold up the pictures correctly. It was 1692, and George was going to be 7 years old tomorrow. Aunt Anna took him into town to choose a birthday gift. "Come on, George," she said. "Let's go into that toy shop over there. I want to buy something for you for your birthday." "No, thank you, Aunt Anna. You know all I want is a musical instrument. And you know very well that your father will not allow a musical instrument in the house. Look, there's my favorite pastry shop. Let's go buy some chocolate cake." "No, thank you," answered George sadly. George went home and put himself to bed. What a miserable start to a 7th birthday. He hadn't been asleep for long when he awoke. Someone was patting his shoulder. It was Aunt Anna. "Shh, George, don't make a sound. Follow me. I have a surprise for you." So they crept up the stairs to the attic. When they reached the attic door, Aunt Anna opened it, and George stared inside in astonishment. There, standing on slender legs, was the most beautiful clavier George had ever seen. "How on earth did you manage it?" George exclaimed. "Never mind that," said Aunt Anna. "Aren't you going to try it?" George Handel sat down on the stool and gazed at the keys. He was breathless with excitement. Then he began to run his fingers over the keyboard. A clavier is a precursor to the piano, so it came before the piano. "Oh, Aunt Anna," said George, "thank you. This is the very best birthday present in the whole world." "I knew you'd like it," said Aunt Anna. "But remember, practice when your father's out. You know he doesn't approve of music." George's father was a barber surgeon. Not only was he good at cutting hair, but he was also a doctor who could perform operations. Because he was a capable doctor, he had a very good job. He worked for the Duke of Weissenfels, who loved music and had his own orchestra. "Please, Father," George begged, "take me to meet the players in the orchestra. I'd love to meet some real musicians." But Father Handel frowned and said, "Books, study, that's what's important, not music." So George would wait until his father was out. Then he would race up to the attic to his own secret clavier and sit down and practice. He was so talented that without a single lesson, he became a very good little musician. "But how can I get to Weissenfels and meet all the real musicians?" he wondered. Every month, Father Handel would spend several days at Weissenfels to trim the Duke's hair and to perform his operations. One fine morning, George woke up and heard his father moving around upstairs. "He's going to Weissenfels. I know he is. Maybe he'll let me go with him this time." He jumped out of bed and got dressed. Upstairs, his father finished packing his scissors and special instruments, and when he came downstairs with his bag, George was waiting. "Father, may I please go to Weissenfels with you?" "No," said his father. "Books, not music. You must study hard." And he walked quickly across the courtyard and climbed into his coach. The coach started off across the cobblestones, but George made up his mind. He would go with his father. He started to run after the coach. Before very long, the coachman reported to Father Handel that there was a little boy following them. Father Handel looked around. He saw George and gave orders for the coach to stop. George came panting up in a cloud of dust, looked into his father's angry face. His father shook his finger and said, "Now then, George, you were wrong to disobey, but it's too far to go back. Climb up. But when we get to Weissenfels, you had better behave yourself." "Yes, Father," said George meekly. He climbed aboard the coach. He was happy. He had gotten his way. He was going to Weissenfels to meet those musicians at last. His dad doesn't look happy. Every morning while the Duke held his court and Father Handel saw his patients, George would climb up to the organ loft in the Duke's chapel and sit down and play. One day the organist found him and said, "You play well. Where did you study?" "I've never had any lessons, sir," said George. "No lessons? Really? Well, you'd better be here next Sunday when the Duke comes to service." On Sunday morning, the Duke of Weissenfels attended his chapel to pray. George was up in the organ loft, staring down. "Oh, look at all those people. Look at all those ladies dressed up in such beautiful clothes. And look at the gentlemen's wigs. They're all so grand." Those are my kids. "Now, young man," said the organist, "you are going to play the march when the Duke stands up at the end of service." "Me? You must be joking," said George. "Not a joke," said the organist. "I mean it. You will play the march at the end of service." "But how will I know when to start?" "I told you," said the organist, "when the Duke stands up." George was scared. What if the Duke was angry? A little boy playing the march at the end of the service? It was unheard of. He peeked over the edge. There was the Duke of Weissenfels, looking very strict. George turned around and sat down. The service was nearly over. His hands were trembling. He waited for that magic moment when the Duke of Weissenfels would stand up at the end of service. There was a moment of silence, and then the Duke of Weissenfels stood up. Everyone rose as the Duke went solemnly down the aisle. One lady was just beginning her curtsy when she noticed little George up there playing. She was so surprised that she wobbled. And then the next lady looked up, and she wobbled too. The Duke frowned at these wobbling ladies and followed their gaze. "A boy," he said. "Who is that boy?" "That is the son of your barber surgeon, Mr. Handel, sir." "Is he indeed? Send Mr. Handel to me with the boy." Oh, here's another picture. Father Handel bowed before the Duke. "A very fine little musician you have there, Mr. Handel." He's not bad," said Mr. Handel. "Not bad? He's very good. Who's his teacher?" "Oh, he's not taking lessons, your grace," replied Father Handel. Handel. "What?" cried the Duke. "He should be studying. Here you are, boy," and he gave George a purse of golden coins. "You must have music lessons," he said. "Mr. Zachow is a fine teacher." Father Handel could not refuse. As soon as they arrived back home, George rushed to tell Aunt Anna his good news. "I'm going to have music lessons," he told her. "The Duke says so. And now we don't have to keep the clavier a secret anymore." George Frederick Handel studied hard and became a famous composer whose music is known and played all over the world. He was the favorite musician of King George I and King George II of England, where he lived most of his life. He loved to write music about Bible stories called oratorios. One of them, The Messiah, is probably his best-loved work. And that's the one that goes, "Alleluia, alleluia, 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 alleluia." That's all you say in the whole piece. But you say it very tricky. You sing it very tricky. It's a tricky piece to sing. Here are some of the most famous pieces of music by George Frederick Handel. Water music. We just talked about that. There's one called the Music for Royal Fireworks, and that was for King George II. And then The Messiah. So you can look those up. And that's the end. I'll see you next time.